we participate in crippling them. We don't do them any favors. We should understand poor people have a lot of resources. They have a mind, they have hands, the ability to work. Look at the case, for instance, of very poor immigrants who go to the United States, and actually contrast them with some of the ones who go to Europe, which has more elaborate social welfare. Within 10 years, immigrants to the United States who come with nothing are earning the median income of American workers. That's within 10 years. Overcoming language barriers, cultural barriers, they do very well. You know what is the poorest Asian group in America? It's Filipinos. What percentage of median income do Filipinos earn? Substantially above. That's the poorest Asian immigrant group. They come to the United States typically with nothing. Mexicans also, they come no English or very poor English, no education, limited skills. They do very, very well without being embraced by the welfare state. So we have to be careful not to think of the poor as permanently disabled. They're not. And if you treat them as permanently disabled, you will make them dependent. That would be to do a great harm to them. But then, for those who are truly uninsurable, then we have forms of mutual aid, forms of charity. If those didn't work, if you had exhausted all of those, I think the state would be the last resort, but not the first. Anything else? I mean,
I want to further the question by one. Since libertarian propose the limited government and oppose the welfare state, maybe you can emphasize a little bit on libertarian perspective on taxation, because I think it is a serious concern in Malaysia how the libertarian ideas can help to alleviate the poverty issue.
Did you say on taxation?
Yeah.
Well, let's think about the following. One thing we might want to ask is not only what the state does allegedly for the poor, but what it does to them. And that's also very significant. If you think about, and I don't know the case of Malaysia, so this is difficult for me to say, but I can say in many other countries, when they make it difficult to enter an occupation, it's like a special tax on the poor, right? When it's harder to get in. If you have a licensing occupation, to take a simple example, in the United States, there are 800 occupations that require a license. You have to go to the state, say, I want to be a beautician, a hairdresser, bus driver, whatever it happens to be, that you have to go and get a license for this. In many cases, these have nothing to do with safety certification. Bus driver, I can understand. You have to be trained in how to drive a bus. That makes some sense to me. You would license that in that way. You have a minimal safety requirement. But in the case of, let's say, hairdressers, it has nothing to do with safety. As an example, there was a famous case that my friends were involved in. African Americans have a different kind of hair from other races, right? And consequently, hair treatment is different. But if you did what is called African hair braiding, in which usually young women will braid the hair and they put beads in it, right? This has been brought from West Africa, and a lot of African American women like to do that. They oil the hair and they put in the beads. It's very, very beautiful and appropriate. They like it for the type of hair that they have. But they are required to go through a several-year training process in how to treat the hair of white people. But they don't want to treat the hair of white people, including bleaching and use of chemicals and colors and all that sort of thing. They don't use that in African-style hair braiding. What was the purpose of this license? It was to limit competition in the market. It was to exclude people from providing goods and services. It was a tax on poor women who might have been able to offer hair braiding services to keep them out of the market. And that generates what are called monopoly rents as a consequence. So the first thing is ask, what is the state doing to stop people from bettering their own lives? And for every welfare state politician who says, I want to give a handout to make it easier to buy food, ask them, what have you done to reduce tariffs on food, to make food more expensive for poor people? Consistently, you will find the most explicit advocates of food subsidies also support food protectionism. Well, how can they say we want to give inexpensive food to the poor when their actions, when they support protectionism, makes food more expensive? So maybe the first thing to ask is what things are being done that harm the poor that we could undo, and that might be a healthier agenda. And I have a suspicion that in Malaysia there are lots of things that are done by the state that are harmful to poor people that could be undone as an important part of a poverty eradication project. And finally, I'll tell you the best way to eradicate poverty is to create wealth. Because fundamentally, poverty does not have any causes. Poverty is what happens when wealth is not created. If you want to eliminate poverty, find ways to create more wealth. And that is the best poverty eradication program imaginable. Do we have one last question that was over here? Yes, ma'am.
When you say licensing in America, if I'm not mistaken, the license applies to certain places, right? If you apply it in the state of Florida, it's only for Florida.
Absolutely. That's another form of protectionism.
That area.
That's right. And so consequently, you might have been licensed in the state of Florida, and then you move, let's say you get married or whatever, you move to California.
And you need to get a new license.
Not only do you need to get a new license, sometimes you have to go through the same training program.
Yeah.
All right, which is, again, pure protectionism, pure attempt to keep prices high and to restrict competition in the market. There are lots of examples of these sorts of things. A good one would be in school. In order, if you want to become a teacher in most American states, maybe all of them, you have to get a special teaching credential. This is basically 2 years of wasted time, right? Because you might have a PhD in physics from Harvard University, be a great teacher. They will not allow you to teach at a high school in physics unless you go to 2 years in all kinds of courses in how to cut out pieces of paper and paste them down and so on. It's a pure obstacle to the market. It has nothing to do with increasing quality of education. It protects the teachers' unions, and teachers' unions are one of the most powerful lobbies in the United States. They don't like competition, so they add an additional burden to entering the market. So that element of having 50 different licensing requirements that have to be undergone 50 times if you want to be active in all states multiplies the effect of what I was describing, that it restricts access into the market. It also has one other bad consequence. People tend to produce goods and services on the black market. I'm sure this never happens in Malaysia. There's undoubtedly no black market behavior. Black markets are the response to irrational restrictions, by and large. But the problem is they erode understanding and support for the rule of law. Because when people become accustomed to evading the law, they lose respect for the law itself. And that's another bad consequence of that kind of interventionism. All done?
Good.
Okay.
That's it? Are you...
Unless there's any other question someone wants to pose or issue they want to raise.
Okay. If there's none, then thank you very much, Tom.
Thank you.